Hello, welcome to Creative You Knitting and Crocheting Podcast. I'm Catherine Kirby. And I wanted to mention something about, I was talking about this negative connotation about only old ladies knit and crochet, which is totally not true. And I finished the whistling season, which I loved it. And I started to read it over, and of course it means so much more the second time. But in the book, there was an old lady that they had to call Aunt, even though it was their mother's sister, their aunt's husband's mother. She's a crotchety old lady, Aunt Eunice, and Sunday clad in her Victorian lavender dress, crochet hook viciously at work at yet another doily to foist onto Ray. The parlor looked snowed on. So many of its surfaces were covered with incessant lacework. I once saw a picture of this elderly lady and everything was crocheted. But Aunt Eunice dies and the death scene is quite dramatic as the three boys knock on the door to deliver Christmas presents, and she has passed away. But at one point, Paul, the older boy, has to stay there after she has passed away, and he says that, let's see here, that he felt like, basically like the place was shrouded in crochet, and I'll find it then, it made him very uneasy and everything. So, Aunt Eunice. How could a woman that tiny linger in every pore of a house, especially at night, where every night now I crept between the covers like a trespasser in what had been female territory? Rose had done away with Aunt Eunice's doilies on everything, thank heavens, but the whole fussy room still carried an atmosphere of having been crocheted into existence rather than carpented. So I even started reading a book, Beginning to Knit, and it talked about an ad manager called a yarn shop and wanted to do an ad. Let's put an old lady in a rocking chair. No. But if you look this up, anti-macassar, all of these fancy doilies and lace work, small cloth placed over the backs of arms or chairs or heads or cushions to prevent the soiling or these big oil spots, because the men use this macassar oil on their hair, and also it was an unguent for the hair commonly used by men in the early 19th century. The poet Byron called it thine incomparable oil. But it became so widespread that men would sit down and they'd get a big oil spot on the furniture. And they even started installing these anti-macassars in theaters. But it became so associated in people's minds with the Victorian era. You can just look up images and images of crocheted. So the only way we can really lose that association is by knitting and crocheting beautiful, modern looking things. So this is my tank top. I wish there was a way to have it off the needles because it looks big, and I don't think it's going to be big because I have gauge. And you know, gauge is so important when you're making a, here's a picture, Togue Pond. And so I have now bound off for the armholes, right there and right there. And now I'm ready to just start working the back. Some people that made it, because it does have a curve to it, the front is shorter, said certain ways they move, their belly sticks out, and if they did it again, they would just do it straight. But other people that made it loved it. This cotton linen yarn feels fantastic. I was making this as a gift, but now I'm not sure. So I am supposed to put half of my stitches on just scrap yarn or a stitch holder. So the old-fashioned stitch holders that look like a big wire clip are kind of out of vogue. This is probably what I will use on this. It's a long, almost looks like a cable of a needle, and you can snap it into place. You can pull the stitches around so they're not on a big bar. Depending on what you're making, I guess you could put the back of a sweater on here or a child's sweater. This has a cap. There's two in here. And then this is the smaller one. These are very nice. And then the other notion that I wanted to show you, which I really want to try, is a wrist ball holder. So you don't have to fuss with your yarn. You can just have it there. Don't have to worry about it rolling around. I think it's clever, and I really want to use it. So we shall see. Little fiasco here. I ordered a knitting book for the shop. Because of COVID, the mail came to our house. When it was sent from the McSherrystown Post Office to the Hanover Post Office declined it, and it got sent back to Thrift Books. So I contacted them, and they said, well, just ask for your money back. We don't have the book back. It was actually Knitted Monsters for kids. And then they wrote and said, oh, we have the book. We'll send it back. So then this arrives. What just a total screw up. Everybody was so young. It is I think 4.5, 5-star book about the golden era during the 1920s, and this very gifted artist, Gerald Murphy, and his second wife, Sarah. So I've tried to contact Thrift Books, and nothing's really happening. Oh. Crocheters, I will get back to crochet at some time. So a few days ago, I told you about this lady that called at the shop because my husband filled out a card. He told me later he thought it was about Medicare, and he was curious about me when I get there. And here, stupid me, I thought I turned 63. I'm 62. My daughter-in-law always says, you never know what your age is. I don't know, because I don't really care. So the gentleman arrives today. She described him as a red-faced, kind of blondish hair guy. He had quite the psoriasis. And he sits down because I had called the woman back and said, we talked the other day, and she said, well, that's possible. And I said, you know, what is the organization? And she said, Senior Benefits of York County. Because in the back of my mind, I thought, is this an insurance agent? He sits down and he says, Catherine, hello. And he says, this is to discuss your burial. how you're going to pay for your burial. So an hour later, it was life insurance. And I said to my husband later, how did you get me into this? Don't fill out any more cards. In fact, the gentleman told him, Paul, don't fill out any more cards. You're not the type of people I usually see young people. Because at one point, my husband said, okay, if she lives 20 years, she's going to pay in $50,000 and get what, $15,000? That's not a good deal. So since I'm not making any money anyway right now at the shop, it's not a good deal anyway. I'm hoping to get raptured and not have to get buried. This is Wee Susan. I love Taiga Hilliard's patterns. She has the sweetest patterns for girls. And this is a baby dress, and this is one of her free patterns. And you start up here, and then when you get down so far, you join it by overlapping stitches, and you just knit them together. This is actually the back. So this will have two little buttons, And then I'm on the home stretch here. My yarn is a mercerized cotton yarn, and I don't know why, but I didn't know that it was going to create this kind of a fabric. I don't know that I'd call it striping. It's more like color pooling, but it's pleasant. It's, a little bit of striping there. It's nice. I'm not sure what to think about my collar turning down. This is the front of the dress. I mean, it doesn't look bad. This is very easy. All you have to do is put markers, increase before and after the markers, and then once you join, it's just like knitting a cowl. There's nothing difficult about it. And I even wondered if I really wanted to do this little yarn to knit, yarn over knit two together, because if it's not anchored with, say, a row of purl stitches, it sticks out, and that's kind of what's happening. It sticks out. So anyway, I'm almost done. It's cute. I was thinking about embroidering a little flower there. I think that would really be cute. And to show you, so this comes in newborn 0 to 3 months, and I think 3 to 6, and it's done in a DK weight. You should check out her patterns because they're really good. So I wanted to show you some things that people have been making. So there's the I can't pronounce it, Macassar. Oh. And I think when you grew up seeing them, I remember going to Aunt Irma's house. It was my grandmother's aunt that, all the furniture was shrouded in those. But I had mentioned Sharon Kuhn making a blouse. So she makes 2 pieces of this very beautiful cotton acrylic blend and then sews them together, and it will be a boxy top. And then one of the ladies agreed to make this for my shop. It's a little capelet for a child. The little embroidery is really cute. It's done in a worsted weight. It's a free pattern, and I'll have to figure out the name of that. Well, my dog decided to see if there's even a piece of cat food left in the cat's dish. You hear him banging around. He was kind of bad today. He ate his food, and then he ate the little dog's food. So this is a very book about creative thinking, and it puts you through all kind of mental exercise. I lost this book. I found it out in the garage. That's my husband's doing. So it asks you to look at these figures and say which one is different. And they say, well, you could say the middle one because it's the only one that's open, but other possibilities exist too. This could be 1 because it's the only one that's half, and this could be the right answer. And the problem in school is there's only one right answer. And this says nothing is more dangerous than an idea when it is the only one you have, because you should have a bunch of things. So they talk about creativity, and if you're going to be creative, you're going to fail a lot. They show you this. What is this figure? So at first I see a bird. But then when you look at the white, it's a question mark. Once you find the question mark, it's, almost impossible not to know it's there. And then you tend maybe not to see the bird. But they put you through a lot of exercises to just get your thinking. So it says that you have to develop a different logic, trying new things. If you are doing things that are routine and have a high likelihood of correctness, then you will probably make very few errors. I remember years ago, my husband and I signed up for a painting class. And my husband is all about neat and tidy and being organized. And the funny thing is, we didn't realize it was a class for kids. This was at a Michael's, I think. And these kids, she'd say, mix up a little cerulean blue, add a little this, add a little that. And man, they're going to town. Paul's like, what did she say? And then partway through, she goes, okay, you can get out your snacks. And I look at Paul and say, did we bring snacks? But she said, whatever personality hangups you have will interfere with your creativity. You know, if you don't want to get messy, if you don't want to mess things up, if you're afraid to take risk. I mean, she was very true. So if you are doing things that have no precedence in your experience, then you will be making your share of mistakes. Innovators do not bat 1,000, far from it, but they do get new ideas. The creative director of an advertising agency told me he isn't happy unless he's failing at least half of the time. He said, if you're going to be original, you're going to be wrong a lot. We're innovators. We're doing things no one has ever done. One of my clients said, therefore, we are going to make mistakes. My advice to you, make your mistakes and make them in a hurry. So that at least makes me feel better about some designing I've tried to do that hasn't worked out or didn't look the way I thought it would. And the thing about children is they play. It's proven that they play as hard as we work. But they're incredibly creative because there's no right and wrong. You know, you give a kid a box of Legos and he's just doing all kinds of things. So they said that people do better when I'm just playing around, I'm just toying with a problem, I'm not taking myself too seriously, and so forth. Play is frivolous. You can do anything. So more later, because this is a really neat book, and we've been kind of railroad into thinking you got to do it this way, you know, whatever. So more later. This is about unbreaking mental locks, and there's a sister to this book called A Kick in the Pants, and they're both really good. We used to even use them at the doctor's office to try to think outside the box and get out of routines and do things differently. Just because something's always done that way doesn't mean so. Like freeform crochet or knitting, just have at it, right? So one last thing, I was reading Minnow Knits too, and this is a gal, Jill Eaton, who really specialized in knitting children's clothing and got phenomenal at it. And one thing she says, you always have to measure the child. So if you're making something for a child, make sure they're measured. One thing that I have seen is most homes lack a tape measure. If I contact somebody in the family and say, hey, can you measure one of my grandchildren? Well, we don't have a tape measure. So a whack on the side of the head, right? Well, can you take a piece of string or something around the house and measure them and then send that to me, you know? So she had a piece in here that surprised me that I wanted to tell you about. And then she said, finishing is everything. You can't just seam it up. You gotta, lay it out and steam it and all. But she had this little piece in here, and I realize I'm running over 15 minutes, about Addi turbos. And I have some Addi turbo needles in the shop, and she had talked about you knit much faster. Those amazing turbos. I always look for the best tools and materials. They're billed as amazing turbos, which is perfectly accurate. I do know they knit quiet, but she said that because the yarn slips a lot easier, that you knit a lot faster. And who doesn't want to do that? So with that, I'll see you next time. Keep that smile and shine, baby, shine.